Imagine throwing like the biggest stadium concert in history.
Oh, wow. Okay. Setting the scene.
Yeah, so you put out 50 million tickets, the doors open up, and every single seat is just packed to the rafters. And then nobody turns on the microphones.
Oh, man.
Right. The lights are on, the crowd is definitely there, but there is just this bizarre, eerie silence. And that exact feeling, that tension between a massive event on paper and just a complete void of energy and reality,
Yeah.
that is exactly what is happening in Ethiopia right now.
Just days before historic national election, no less.
Exactly. Welcome to this week's Deep Dive. We are coming to you straight from the newsroom of Addis Fortune, which is Ethiopia's largest English weekly newspaper.
Always great to be here.
And we have been just poring over a giant stack of stories from this week's edition. Our mission today for you, the listener, is to really explore Ethiopia at a true crossroads.
Yeah, it's a fascinating moment. We're basically looking at a country that has drafted some of the most honestly ambitious reform blueprints in its history. But then those blueprints collide with the messy, frictional reality of trying to actually execute them on the ground.
And it's not just one sector either. We're going to look at how that collision plays out across 4 entirely different areas today.
Right, starting with that strangely quiet mega election set for June Red 2026.
And from there, we'll examine some sweeping shifts in international trade, plus this massive plan to unlock trillions in capital markets.
Trillions with a T, yeah. And then we'll break down a really fierce legal battle over tax fairness that is currently testing the limits of state power.
And finally, we will look at how this gap between blueprint and reality becomes a literal matter of life and death in the country's medical supply chain.
Because whether you are a voter or a business owner or even a patient just waiting for medication, this friction shapes your daily life.
It really does. So let's start with the stadium concert analogy, because the data from the upcoming June Red national poll is, it's staggering.
It really is huge on paper.
You have 47 distinct political parties on the ballot. There are 10,933 individual candidates, and the registered voter base has surged by 32.1% since the last poll.
Which is a massive jump.
Right. That means over 50 million people are registered to vote. By every single metric, this is a mega election. It should be, dominating every street corner.
It absolutely should be. But what we are seeing is that formal participation simply does not equal political access.
Okay, let's unpack this. How can an election this massive feel so small in public energy?
Well, having your name on a ballot and millions of registered voters out there doesn't actually mean you possess the physical or financial capacity to reach them. The unusual quiet you are seeing on the streets, it isn't apathy.
It's not.
No, it is a silence engineered by 3 very tangible forces: localized insecurity, logistical brick walls, and just a severe lack of money.
The money aspect alone is fascinating. We tend to think of campaign finance in terms of buying television ads or giant billboards.
Right, the flashy stuff.
But for an opposition party like the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Party, the EPRP, they are burning through 143,000 birr a day, just attempting basic survival on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
And it isn't even going toward visibility. They are fighting fuel shortages and basic logistical nightmares.
Exactly, because there is this hidden risk premium attached to opposition campaigning. An EPRP spokesperson detailed how they cannot even rent basic office space or meeting halls.
Really, just basic space.
Yeah, hotel owners are genuinely fearful of hosting opposition parties. Car rental companies are hesitating to lease them vehicles. So the cost isn't just driven by inflation.
It's driven by fear.
Yes. Citizens and business owners are afraid to donate or lend their resources because they worry that being associated with political dissent might cost them their business licenses or just attract unwanted scrutiny. That fear completely starves peaceful political operations of the oxygen they need to run.
And in some places, it goes way beyond just being starved of resources. The doors are just slammed shut entirely.
Right.
Take the Kucha People's Democratic Party, the KPDP. They represent a constituency of over 500,000 people. And their president, Jina Getabu, is a sitting member of parliament.
He is, yeah.
And yet, he claims his party was entirely blocked by local security forces from traveling into their own constituency. He literally stated they couldn't even stand in front of their voters for 1 minute to simply say, "Elect us."
Which creates a really profound asymmetry in the campaign experience.
Totally.
If you go to Addis Ababa, opposition parties say new city regulations restricting printed campaign materials have effectively erased their public visibility. But if you travel to places like Bahir Dar, the ruling Prosperity Party is highly visible.
Oh, yeah. The reporting notes that opposition candidates are alleging the incumbent is actively utilizing state-funded infrastructure, like those massive new digital screens erected for corridor development projects.
Right, using them to broadcast their own candidates.
Yeah.
And in Adama, the ruling party's banners and posters are just blanketing the city.
Which, actually, before we go any further, as journalists working at Addis Fortune, we need to make our position explicitly clear to you, the listener.
Yes, very important point.
In discussing this election, we are impartially reporting the claims, experiences, and allegations made by all parties as documented in our source material. We are absolutely not endorsing the viewpoints of the ruling Prosperity Party, nor are we taking the side of the opposition parties.
Exactly. Our sole job is just to convey the reality on the ground as it has been reported to us.
Right. Okay, so getting back to that reported reality, it's forcing parties to drastically adapt just to survive, right?
Oh, absolutely. Look at Azima, which is a major opposition party. They actually have the second largest candidate list in this election. Because traditional street campaigning has become either too physically risky or just too financially draining. They've almost entirely abandoned the streets.
Which brings us to the TikTok strategy. I found this so interesting.
It's wild.
Yeah, they have deliberately pivoted to short-form video platforms to target the youth demographic. It completely bypasses the physical risk of booking a hotel hall or renting a sound truck.
It is a very smart survival tactic, but it fundamentally changes the nature of democratic engagement. Digital campaigning is a broadcast, it's not a dialogue.
Right, you can't really talk back.
Exactly. You cannot look a voter in the eye, and a voter cannot grab a microphone to hold a candidate accountable in a town square.
Yeah.
And honestly, even the National Election Board is feeling the physical constraints.
Yeah, the logistics.
They have a 10.5 billion birr budget, but they are drowning in procurement bottlenecks and transport constraints, just trying to navigate a country whose physical infrastructure is notoriously difficult to traverse.
So the political system is technically open on paper, but starved of resources and restricted by structural risk in reality. It's fascinating because if you look at the U.S. Trade Representative's latest report on Ethiopia's economy, you see the exact same architectural flaw.
You really do.
The government is desperate to invite the world in, but seems terrified to actually let anyone move freely once they cross the threshold.
Well, the economic reforms are just as ambitious as the political ones. I mean, we are talking about a $2.5 billion trade relationship with the United States.
That's huge.
And furthermore, Ethiopia is making a massive, renewed push to finally join the World Trade Organization.
For after what, 20 years?
2 decades of negotiations, yeah. But the current trade minister believes they have made more progress in the last year, especially since the macroeconomic reforms and easing of capital controls back in July 2024, than in the previous 20 years combined. They want WTO accession this year.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because this is the part I find hardest to reconcile. The U.S. report is just filled with frustrations from foreign businesses about sheer unpredictability.
Oh, the friction is everywhere.
Right. Ethiopia says they want foreign investment, but then they mandate that foreign bank ownership is capped at exactly 49%. They decree that all trade financing must still pass exclusively through domestic banks. And the customs regulations, they change overnight.
Literally overnight, so.
Yeah. They suspended VAT on sugar and edible oil, only to suddenly reimpose it. They completely banned the import of internal combustion vehicles to favor EVs without any prior warning. So if Ethiopia wants foreign capital and WTO membership so badly, why keep such a stubborn, unpredictable lock on banking, logistics, and imports?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a highly calibrated protectionist transition. It can look like total chaos from the outside, but it is a deliberate strategy heavily modeled on China's economic rise.
Oh, I see.
You don't just throw the doors open to the global market all at once, because cheaper, highly efficient foreign conglomerates will completely wipe out your domestic industries overnight.
That makes sense.
So they cap foreign bank ownership at 49%. Why that specific number? Because it allows foreign capital and expertise to flow into the country, but it legally ensures that domestic interests retain majority voting control. They are trying to open the vault, but they absolutely insist on holding the only key.
But by holding that key so tightly, they are effectively starving their own economy of the very capital it needs to grow. One expert in the reporting estimated that the Ethiopian economy needs up to 7 trillion birr in annual financing to thrive.
And the domestic banking sector just cannot supply that on its own.
No, not even close.
Which leads us directly to the domestic capital trap. Because, it isn't just foreign money being kept at bay here. The domestic wealth of the nation is locked in a vault of its own making.
The scale of this is hard to wrap your head around, honestly. Ethiopia currently has 5.6 trillion birr in financial assets. That is equal to 37.2% of the country's entire GDP.
It's a mountain of money.
But 95% of all pension assets are conservatively locked into treasury instruments.
Right, and let's break down exactly what that means for the listener. When a worker pays into their pension fund, that money doesn't just sit in a physical vault somewhere.
Right, it has to do something.
The fund needs to invest it. But currently, the rules mandate that almost all of it goes into treasury instruments, which basically means they are lending the money directly to the government to fund state operations.
Right, so the state is essentially borrowing the public's retirement savings to fund itself.
Exactly.
It's incredibly safe, but it's totally sterile. That means those trillions of birr aren't available for, like, a local entrepreneur who wants a loan to build a manufacturing plant or a tech startup trying to scale. It just suffocates the private sector.
It does. And the government actually recognizes this bottleneck, which is why they have drafted a new capital market master plan.
Okay.
The goals are highly ambitious. They want the Ethiopian Securities Exchange to hit 50 company listings and attract 3 million retail investors by 2029.
Wait, 50 company listings and 3 million retail investors by 2029.
That sounds like a fantasy when you just told me the state controls all trade financing and dictates where pension funds can invest. How on earth do they get from point A to point B? Through a massive structural overhaul. The blueprint proposes creating a brand new insurance and pensions authority. They want to introduce something called bank assurance.
Wait, bank assurance? That just means letting my local bank teller sell me life insurance when I go in to make a deposit.
Yeah, precisely. It uses the existing network of bank branches to radically expand who has access to insurance.
Oh, that's clever.
They are also proposing micro-pensions designed specifically for informal workers who aren't part of the traditional corporate system. The ultimate goal of this master plan is to loosen those strict investment mandates.
But for real, the money.
Exactly, allowing pension funds and insurers to take that 5.6 trillion birr and finally invest it into the private sector. You know, into real estate trusts, corporate bonds, and collective investment schemes.
It sounds incredible on paper. But to get 3 million regular citizens to hand over their savings and trust a brand new stock market, you need absolute faith in state institutions.
You really do.
You have to believe that the referee is going to play fair. And right now, if you look at the courts, the state's relationship with its own legal and financial professionals is, well, it's breaking down.
The friction over tax reform. This is where the grand economic blueprint meets the messy reality of enforcement, and it is getting very heated.
There is a massive rebellion happening right now over value-added tax, or VAT. The federal Supreme Court just had to issue an interim order to physically shield 190 lawyers from a new Ministry of Finance directive.
Wow, 190 lawyers.
Yeah. This directive basically attempted to force legal professionals to register for VAT, completely ignoring the usual income thresholds that apply to other businesses.
And the mechanism here is a battle over executive overreach.
Yeah.
The lawyers are arguing that the Ministry of Finance is just bypassing statutory law to squeeze them for revenue. It places an incredibly uneven administrative and financial burden on them. Now, the ministry counters that the VAT is ultimately paid by the clients, not the lawyers. But the legal community has turned this into a massive test of professional autonomy versus state power. Over 700 lawyers have now petitioned for relief.
And it isn't just the lawyers feeling the squeeze. At the exact same time, there is a new draft tax administration bill that is overhauling how tax disputes work for every business in the country.
Now, the penalties are severe.
The fines are skyrocketing. If a trader fails to issue a simple receipt, the fine is doubling to 100,000 birr.
That's massive.
But there's one specific rule in this draft bill that fundamentally redefines the concept of fairness. Under this new legislation, if a taxpayer doesn't submit a piece of evidence during their initial tax assessment with the auditor, they are legally barred from ever using it later during a complaint or an appeal.
And it goes further than that.
It does.
Yes. If they do try to submit late evidence, and that evidence proves that their tax liability should actually be lower, they could face a penalty equal to 20% of the revised tax amount.
So what does this all mean? It's like being on trial for a crime, and after you are convicted, you finally find the security footage proving your absolute innocence.
Right.
But the judge says, sorry, you can't show the jury the tape because you didn't have it on the exact day you were arrested. Oh, and because you found the tape late, we are going to fine you.
That's exactly how it feels to the businesses.
It punishes a citizen for uncovering the truth. Where is the line between enforcing administrative compliance and just penalizing valid evidence?
That is the exact debate paralyzing tax professionals in Addis Ababa right now. But you have to look at the mechanism driving the government's behavior.
Okay, what's their angle?
The state desperately needs consolidated compliance and efficiency to fund all these grand blueprints we've discussed. Currently, the tax system is plagued by endless, drawn-out litigation. Taxpayers will suddenly find new accounting documents years into an appeal process, dragging cases out indefinitely. The government wants finality, they want to close the books and collect the revenue.
But a veteran lawyer in our source material called this out perfectly, noting that punishing taxpayers for producing legitimate documents sacrifices fundamental fairness at the altar of efficiency.
To try to mitigate that friction, the new bill introduces a third-party mediation system.
Okay.
The idea is that before a dispute escalates into a massive legal fight at the Tax Appeal Commission, the taxpayer and the authority can sit down with a mediator for 2 months to try and settle the issue amicably.
Which sounds incredibly reasonable in theory.
In theory, yes. But the skepticism from legal advisors is intense, because who exactly are these mediators going to be? Ethiopia does not currently have a formal independent tax advisory institution trained for this specific role. Furthermore, legal experts are asking, if the tax authority believes it is strictly following the letter of the law, why would they ever compromise in mediation?
They wouldn't have any incentive to.
Exactly. The fear is that these won't be impartial mediators helping to find the truth, but rather institutional enforcers brought in to strong-arm business owners into settling quickly so the government gets paid faster.
So you have lawyers and the state endlessly debating procedural timelines and evidence rules in courtrooms. But debating friction in a courtroom is almost a luxury.
It is.
Because in some sectors of Ethiopian society, when the blueprint fails and friction takes over, the consequences are immediate, physical, and devastating. And nowhere is that more apparent than in Ethiopia's healthcare supply chain.
This is where the gap between the ideal blueprint and the messy reality drops all pretense of bureaucracy. It becomes a literal matter of life and death.
Addis Fortune ran an in-depth audit of the Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Supply Service, the EPSS. This is the federal agency tasked with procuring and distributing life-saving medicines to public hospitals all across the country. And on paper, they are doing incredible things. They recently launched a massive digital overhaul titled Project Smile to integrate all their procurement and distribution into one seamless, visible digital system.
And their volume is massive.
Yeah.
The reporting shows they procured 13 billion birr in medical supplies, boasting a 79% availability rate for essential medicines in their central stock.
That is the architectural blueprint. But then the internal assessment was published, and the physical reality is shocking.
Yeah, the numbers are grim.
They found that 42% of the EPSS business processes added absolutely zero operational value. 60% of their workflows depended on repetitive manual handoffs between departments.
The system was essentially eating its own resources.
Exactly. And you see the devastating result of that friction when you look at a specific facility. They profiled Yekatite 12 Hospital. The doctors there sent a request for 1,000 necessary medical items to treat their patients. Do you know how many the EPSS could actually successfully supply?
Let me guess. Not 1,000.
314.
Wow, less than a third.
314 out of 1,000. It is a dark, tragic irony. You can spend millions building a shiny new digital toy, a dashboard to track your inventory. You can give it a friendly name like Project Smile, but a digital dashboard is completely useless to a dying patient if the physical pill is not on the shelf.
It really is.
Software cannot fix a broken physical supply chain.
What's fascinating here is the ripple effect this creates. When the state supply chain fails, these public hospitals cannot just close their doors and stop treating patients.
No, they have to do something.
So they are forced to venture out into the private market to procure those missing 686 items themselves.
Which instantly ruins their operational budgets.
It decimates their budgets because it exposes them to wild price volatility. But more dangerously, it pushes hospitals toward unregulated channels. Health specialists warn that resorting to private, multi-vendor sourcing opens the door to severe quality assurance risks.
Oh, because you don't know where it's coming from.
Exactly. When you are buying in a panic from dozens of different private importers, how do you verify the medicine isn't counterfeit? How do you ensure it was stored at the correct temperature?
You can't.
The government is proposing to help manage these private tenders, but that is ultimately just a band-aid. Until domestic pharmaceutical manufacturing actually scales up to meet demand, they aren't solving the shortage. They are just managing the crisis.
It all comes right back to that original gap between the blueprint and the construction site. And, this matters directly to you, the listener.
It touches everything.
It really does. Whether you are a citizen trying to decide if it is safe to brave a subdued, quiet election, or a business owner trying to navigate a terrifying maze of new tax penalties and locked-up capital markets, or a patient just praying the hospital logistics hold up long enough to get you your medicine. Ethiopia's current crossroads shapes your daily life. The ambitious blueprints exist, the vision is clearly there, but the friction of reality is everywhere.
And analyzing all these stories together leaves us with a final, really provocative thought to mull over. In the reporting about the election, one of the observers noted that on the quiet campaign trail, silence looks like order.
Silence looks like order. Wow.
Could that phrase be the defining illusion for this entire era of reform in Ethiopia? Think about it. Whether it is a digital supply chain dashboard that reports perfect data while hospital shelves sit empty, or a stock market master plan that looks brilliant while 95% of the money is sterile, or an election that boasts 50 million registered voters on paper, but is completely quiet on the streets, is the single biggest risk of this reform era mistaking bureaucratic silence for actual functional progress.
Are we looking at a perfectly drawn architectural blueprint, marveling at the sharp lines, while completely ignoring the fact that the bricks being delivered are crumbling in our hands?
That's the real question.
And that is a question that is going to linger over every one of these reforms for a long time to come.
Thank you so much for joining us on this week's deep dive into the reporting from Addis Fortune. We'll be back next time to unpack the next big story. Take care, everyone.